Here's a painful truth. Data is rarely clean. Missing values, inconsistent formats, duplicate records, and column names that does not make sense. Sounds familiar? Hi, I'm Nivedha, and welcome back to Chapter 2 of Star Agile's Power BI course. In case you have not watched the previous video, I highly recommend to go back and watch because it will lay a strong foundation for today's lesson. In the Chapter 2, we are going to cover the data extraction and transformation using Power Query Editor. Here, you will understand how a messy Excel file is cleaned and transformed into a meaningful data set that is accurate enough to make predictions. Without wasting much time, let's get started. So now that you have a basic understanding about the project that we are handling, let's introduce you to what is called as Power Query Editor. But before that, let us just brief about the tables that we are going to handle. So firstly, as I told, you have the dip table. So dip table basically takes the measurement in centimeter, later on converted to liter. Next, the information flows, and you have fuel rate table in which every day the transactions are recorded because the fuel rate are subjected to time change at any day in a given point of time. Next, you have the shift information. The reason that this particular table is important is because in a particular day, you have too many transactions that happens and not one single employee will be responsible for a dispenser. So you have multiple shifts, right? This shift timings can also influence the way you look at business because in certain shifts, the sales may be higher and in certain other shifts, it can be lesser. So with this particular information, you can also improvise your business performance. Nextly, you have the stock table. This is very important as everything pertaining to this is stored in liters. So the incoming stock, the outgoing stock, so we call it as an opening stock, which is there when the day opens. And then you also have the closing stock. So your sales is basically derived by simply subtracting the closing with the opening stock. You also have another thing to keep in mind. There is something called as testing, which we will see in the course of time. Additionally, you have two tables, that is your cash table and the expense table. In the cash table, at the end of the day, whatever is the amount that you have received is being stored. So you have UPI transaction, cash transaction and cards. Again, you may have different types of cards. So all of this information is stored. Secondly, you have the expenses table wherein the daily expenses are recorded. So now let us go to the Excel, which we are going to derive as that is the source of our data. And let me explain the fields in that particular Excel sheet. So this is an Excel file that we are going to work in. And if you see here, all the 5 tables are present in the same format. Okay. So let's start with the dip. In the dip, I have the daily date information. I have the location information. In our example, we are going to handle 3 locations, which is Bangalore, Chennai and Hyderabad. Please understand that the number of dispensers, the tank related information are all different for the different locations. So we have to normalize the data and harmonize the way the numbers looks like. Next, we are going to go to the tank name. You have the tank fuel type. So here, as we earlier discussed, there are 3 fuel types. One is the petrol, oil and you have the diesel. Dip information, which is stored in centimeter, followed by the stock in liter information. Please make a note that this conversion is directly derived from the business. You do not have any hands or say in correcting this. And also make sure that you do not by mistake change any information because it may affect your end result. You also have the previous day closing stock. So understand why the stock difference is important. The previous day closing stock and the current day opening stock should actually be ideally same. But in circumstances it may not. The differences may be more. But guys, this is basically a dummy data, so do not go with these numbers. So the difference might be slight. If it's higher, it means that there's some amount of water that might be added, probably because of rain, climatic conditions and all of that. And if it is lesser, in summer there are chances for evaporation also. So the reason that you have to know all this is, before working in a project, it is important to understand the in-depth knowledge about the operation of the project. Next, you have the fuel rate. Again, here if you actually notice, the fuel rate is given as MS, MSP and HSD. This is a naming convention that is used for petrol, oil and diesel, which we will be changing, but not here in the Power Query editor. We have the rate, okay. The decimal points are also important, the rate in the rupees. Rate change is not that valid to our visualization, so we can remove this point later. You have the shift readings where you have the dispenser name, you have the type of fuel and the tanker related information. You have the shift opening reading, closing reading and the testing. Testing is very crucial because every day before operation, it is required that a certain amount of liters needs to be tested. Of course, this needs to be again put back to the dispenser depending on the quality of the fuel, but for this particular project's sake, I am eliminating that. So it's only going to be sales minus test. And I've also got the fuel rate in place. Reason being, guys, ideally, whatever is a cash that is being collected on a day in and day out basis needs to tally with whatever is the readings that we have seen in the dispenser, which is why we will be multiplying these two columns, which is sales minus test and fuel rate. Now next, let's move on to the stock. Stock information is also important because this is the only sheet in which you have purchase related information. And you can actually remove this sales before loading, because again, this is not something that is required for the calculation. This will serve more or less for the internal auditing purpose. So we can remove this. Next, you have the overall sales and the closing stock. In the cash collection, like I told you, you have various other columns like the different methods in which the cash is being collected. Again, guys, you have the indent information here. You don't have to worry about that as of now. Indent is nothing but credit system. Again, for this particular project, we are not going to include that, so we can remove it. Next, you have the expenses as per the location. Now, that explains the entire data set which we are going to work in place. So now that we have understood how our data looks in a format of Excel, let us try to understand what are the other different sources of data that you can have. So in real world, guys, Excel is mostly used, right? So that's taken. You may also have other database like SQL Server, which is most widely used. You can also extract information and load information from Oracle, MySQL, etc. You also have various other cloud services. So when I say cloud services, here the server is directly linked to your Power BI. So you have Azure, you also have something called as Google Analytics, right? And Salesforce. So these are just the example, guys. Also for the online sources, you can directly link it from a SharePoint, which is very common in organization. You also can link to various other APIs. Integration is possible. You can have CSVs, JSON files and etc. So ideally, there are more than 100 plus data sources that Power BI supports, which provides seamless integration for smooth processing. So let's just get started and load our Excel into the Power BI. So ideally, if you look at my screen, I have opened a blank workbook. And how do I do this? Click on File, click on Blank Workbook and you will get a blank report. So if it's the first time that you are installing, you may have certain videos that will help you to understand the Power BI. You may as well skip that videos. Alright. So here, this is an interface which we have earlier spoken about. So I'm not going to dive more deep into this. So there are two options, guys, in order to bring your data. So one is directly here through Excel workbook and other one is you can go to get data. If you go to get data, you will find the common data sources. Do you see here? These are the common data sources through which you can bring the data to the Power BI. If you click on more here, it will have an option for you where you can browse through the data sources. You can also search here. So let's say I want a SharePoint. So I can simply search and it will ask me whether I want a SharePoint folder or an online list or a SharePoint list. So in our case, it's going to be Excel. So I'm going to click on Get Data. I'm going to click on Excel Workbook and then navigate quickly to the place where I have stored my material. So this is a fuel bunk data. So there is a connection that is established at this point of time. Please be sure to remember one thing, which most of us mistake. So what you might have possibly done is you might have renamed the file after you load it, right? Or you might have deleted the file or moved it to a separate location. If you perform these 3 steps, your query may not work when you go to refresh the data. So always remember, first decide on the data and store it in a dedicated folder. That is also a best practice. Anyways, even if you perform that mistake, I will be telling you how to rectify that in this particular video. So here, this is a navigator which will help you to preview all the tables. So in my case, you have the cash table, you have the dip table, expenses, fuel rate, shift. So I'm just quickly going to click on all these 5 tables and I'm going to load them. There are 6 tables actually and I'm going to load them. The table here is also same, it's just that it is formatted in a tabular form and I may have to again rename it. So for that sake, I'm going to load these tables. So there are 2 options guys, one is loading directly and transforming. In my case, I am extracting and performing certain operations, right? So I'm going to click on transform. So it takes some time. So here if you see, this is a Power Query editor window. This is an interface in which you will be performing any kind of operation pertaining to cleaning. So in your Power Query editor window, at any given point of time, you may have to navigate to this window using the transform data that I had earlier mentioned, and you're supposed to perform cleaning operations here. Cleaning, data manipulations, and also any kind of calculations that you want in your data. So these operations can be performed in your Power Query editor. So if you're trying to understand the pipeline with respect to our project, we have just completed the first step, which is extraction of the data. We also discussed about various sources and we have made sure that we have imported all the 6 tables, right? So let me quickly explain this interface. It's a very user-friendly interface, okay? So towards the right side, if you see, you have something called as applied steps. So these are nothing but the steps that is automatically done by the Power Query editor in order to make sure that your data is in the right format, which is with respect to the data types. So I have date, I have location. So it is important that the date is in the date format and the location should be in a alphabetical format or the text format. So this has automatically taken care by the help of the numbers or the values that you have in the respective columns. So here that is a step that has happened. Okay. So from the source, if you see, this is a source. If I just click on the first step, right, applied step. So try to understand this. You do not need the knowledge of M language actually, but what is important is you should be able to understand what's happening so that tomorrow if there is any error that occurs, you need to come back here and modify the function tab. So in our case, if you see excel.workbook, file.contents, your star agile, so this is basically the location where I have saved my file. So this should be the place which you will alter just in case you have removed or renamed your file, okay? Assuming that you guys will not do that as I've already told you. So next, let's move on to the navigation. So here it is specifically going to a particular sheet and taking the contents, right? So in our case, it is the stock. So it has finally loaded the contents. So guys, this promote header is nothing but ideally, these header related information will be in this particular row, first row, but this is automatically done. So let's say in case if this is not happened, you can always go to use first rows as headers and you can click on this. Okay. In our case, as it's automated, I will not be doing anything. And also the change data type has automatically detected each and every column and change the type. So you can see here, date is a column, location is a column, tank is a column. Okay. So all the columns have been checked thoroughly, but still it's also your responsibility to make sure that everything is in place. So that way is you do have applied step. At any given point of time, this cross symbol, if you just click this on, the particular step will get removed. There is no concept of Control Z when it comes to the Power Query editor. So guys, that ways you do have, if you just hover on each and every table, you'll be able to see all the information. So now let us do some cleaning operation. Okay. So what are the cleaning operations? So firstly, we need to check the column quality. And how do I do that? Go to the view tab. So in the view tab, I have three things, right? So do you see column quality here? It basically tells the number of valid columns, rows. It tells if there is any error values or if there is any empty values. Empty is something that you have to really be keen on. And also column profiling. Column profiling will basically give me statistical inferences about each and every column. So in our case, it is a date column. How many unique values are there? What is the minimum value that is there? What is the maximum and average value that is there? And also it gives a nice graphical distribution of each and every row. So that's about column quality. That's about column profiling. Next, you have column distribution. This again tells us the distinct unique values. So what is important is your column quality is important, right? So next, I'm going to check if there are any null values. So here, I'm quite sure that my data set may have null values. So I just loaded and yes, it does have. So I'm just going to filter out. So this is the first transformation that you're doing. And I'm just going to say okay. So all the null values are removed. Similarly, this kind of inspection I'll be doing on each and every columns. Okay. I do see here there are no null values, right? In most of it, if there are null values, it will be displayed in the first. So let's say because it's an alphabet, right? It will be displayed. So here I've already removed the null values. But if you see here, column 13 and 14 has got inserted, guys. So here again, it's 100% empty. So we don't want this, right? So multiple columns can be deleted by hitting on Control, followed by this, right click and click on Remove Columns. So do you see here, remove column step is again inserted and the corresponding code is also there, table.remove columns. Next. So that's about this. Everything else looks fine. Yes. Let's move to the dip table. Again, in the dip table, you may have to perform the same operation of removing the null in all the tables. So I'm going to quickly do that here. Alright, so I have made sure that the null value is removed and everything. Let's go to the expense. Expense also looks good. The mode is in place, the amount is in place. As far as fuel rate is concerned, I did talk about the naming convention, right? So here the MS needs to be replaced. Guys, there are two ways of doing this. One is you can just select the column, right click and go to replace values, and here it will basically mention asking what is the value that you have to find. I can just say MS and I can do petrol. But what this is going to do is it's going to replace the value in the current column, right, which is a source column. I don't want that. Reason being, MSP is basically denoted as oil, guys. So when I replace MS with petrol, right, so MSP will get replaced as petrol P. So these kind of things will happen. So let's not do this replacing. Instead, let's add a conditional column. And how do we do that? So go to add column, and under that you have conditional column. So click on that. You can customize the name of the column. You can call it as fuel, just fuel. And then you can add a condition telling that if the fuel type is equal to MS, output that as petrol. Add a clause. If the fuel type is equal to HSD, you're going to replace that as diesel, else you're going to replace that as oil. Also, here the value, you can, check this value whether it's a selected column or anything. In our case, it is just the value that you have to input, okay? And you can just say okay. Now, a particular column that is dedicated as fuel, which will be used to map other tables, is there. Next, we'll be going to shift readings. In the shift readings, there's not much settings that you have to do, except that we discussed on multiplying these two columns, right? So let's do that. In order to multiply, hit on control and select the two columns that you're going to multiply. Common mistake here is people only select one column and they complain that the field is not enabled. No, you have to actually select two columns, and then you have to go to standard. And in the standard, you have an operation here. So you have various other operations like add, multiply, subtract, divide. You're going to click on multiply. So click on multiply, and there is a new step that is inserted, that is multiplication. So again here there is some work that you need to do. So let's replace this as sales in rupees, easier to understand. And also guys, here if you actually see, there is negative value, right? I see some negative value. That's because the sales in liters again has negative value. So let's try to make an absolute out of that, because sometimes what happens is that when you're importing values, right, these kind of errors happen. So you need to first check with your client if you find these kind of negative values in wrong places. So in our case, I do know that it's an error while importing. So I'm just going to right click. So in our case, I know that it is an error that has happened during importing from the software. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to right click and click on transform, and here you have an option to absolute value. So I'm going to get the absolute value. Similarly, even in sales, I'm going to do the same thing. Click on transform and go to absolute value. So now, yes, this looks good, Let's go to the stock related information. Again, stock related information also looks good. I don't see any kind of null values. So here our table is pretty much in place. All the tables are clean. There are no null values. The column names make sense. There are no duplicate records. Everything has dedicated numbers to it, and also the data type looks correct. So now let me bring this to the Power BI. Right now we are in the Power Query editor, guys. So if you just click on the close and apply button that is there in the top corner, so you just have to close and apply. So as soon as you do this, what happens is that all the rows gets brought into the, as soon as you do this, what happens is that all the tables are getting loaded into our Power Query. So let's wait for some time. This could take some time depending on your data and also depending on the space that you have, right? So sometimes most of them complain telling that my Power BI is too slow. It takes a lot of time in loading. So please do check your space as well. Okay, make sure you have things organized and everything. And also running too many processes for a very long time, as you guys know, can also slow the performance. So there you go. In the data tab, you have all the table that has been loaded, which we have discussed so far. So that is going back to the pipeline. The first step, data extraction, and second step, data transformation is also done. So whenever you click on this, if you go to the table view, you will be able to see all the entries, right? Yes, that's in place. Now again guys, sometimes what happens is after transformation, you may realize, okay, this is something that I have to do. I should have done it. So what do you do at that point of time? Again, there are two ways. There is something called as table tools that you see here. So if you just click on the column where you need the changes to occur, just click on that and there will be something called as column tools that open. In the column tool, you see the format of the date here, it is long. We don't want that. As you saw in the data set, all the date formats are short dates. So you can simply select that. Alright. So at any given point of time, after you've brought in the data during the transformation, if you feel there is a necessity that I had changed the data type and if you missed it, there are two ways of doing it. Either you can simply go to the home tab and click on transform data, or if it is just minor changes pertaining to your column, you also have something called as column tools. And how do I get it? Now you're in the report view currently, right? So you need to navigate to the table view where you can see the table. And here if you see, the date is not in the right format that we want, right? So you just click on the column and you will see the option called as column tools. In the column tools, you can change this to short date format. Not just that, guys, if you look at the overall sales here, okay, I do see that there are certain values that are like extreme decimal points. So even that can be corrected. And how do I do that? I do that by either comma separating it. If you do that, it gets rounded off to 2, or you can specifically mention if you want 3 decimal places, you can change it here. Got it? That gets updated. Similarly, I think even in the shift reading, I may have to make that changes again. So here you see I have sales in liters and sales in rupees. I'm just going to click that, okay, and quickly do the transformation. Also, there is an option here where you can display rupees. For example, your fuel rate is in rupees and even your sales is in rupees, right? So you can just click here and in the currency you have a dollar sign here. So you can just navigate down until you find the rupee, Indian rupees. Okay, and even to the sales I'm doing the same thing. It will be there in recently added one. Got it? So this kind of checking also helps you just to make sure that everything is in place right before you have started your modeling work. Okay, so I'm just going to quickly do this transformation in all the columns to make sure that everything is in place. So before we end this second chapter, let us be sure of certain concepts. So first thing, you have to understand the various modes through which you can import data. So right now, you have shift entry table, dip table, cash, shift reading and expense table in place. To understand the data connectivity modes, you have 3 particular modes. Firstly is the direct import mode, which we just did. Second one is a direct query mode. So this particular mode basically queries the database live, and this is very much useful for real-time dashboards. In the next course, you'll understand what is the difference between the import mode, direct mode, and what are the cons of this. But as of this course, we will be working on the import mode because we have imported the data, which makes it much easier for DAX operations. The last is the live connection mode. So live connection basically connects to the existing Power BI model. So the 3 connections are import mode, to summarize, and then you have the direct query mode, and then you have the live connection. Direct query mode is ideally used when you have large data sets, because memory becomes an issue if you have to work on large data sets. Every time you have to refresh the reports, it becomes a little challenging and time taking. The next concept that I want to introduce you to is the concept of row context versus filter context. So these are the certain concepts that you will get asked in an interview if you are a beginner. So firstly, what is a row context? You just can't say that the calculation happens row by row. Always give an example. So in our case, do you remember we created a column that is sales in rupees? And what did we do for this column? We basically multiplied two other columns, right? So whatever is a transaction that has happened here, which is obtained by multiplying the fuel rate and the sales in liters, is reflecting on each and every row of the data set. So these kind of columns are called as calculated columns, which means the context happens on a row by row level. But whereas the filter context is just the opposite. What is it? Now, just have a look at this report, guys. You have two visuals, okay, in place. Just try to understand the concept. You have an external filter, okay. Everybody knows what a filter is. You guys use it in applications, yeah. So, if you click on Bangalore, I will be only able to see the sales on that particular city. If I check on Bangalore, if I check on Hyderabad, I'll be able to see the reports only for that particular city. It is because the filter context is happening, and this is happening while you're working on the dashboard. The data is not stored, the operation is not stored. When you have these kind of context, what happens is that the performance are pretty much quicker, right? Imagine if you have to do some calculation on 10,000 rows of data or lakhs of data, that takes time. So instead of doing that, you doing it the time of query. So instead of doing that, you doing the same at the time of querying helps you save time, and it is also one of the optimization technique. So please use calculated columns only when required. Otherwise, you can use measures which we will be learning in the upcoming video. So a summary, we have understood what is a row context and a filter context. We've also understood what are the different data connectivity modes. Along with that, we have cleaned up our Excel file, we have removed unnecessary columns, we have renamed calculated columns, we have also checked on the data sources, and we have replaced values. So at the end of this module, you have mastered how to learn data transformation. Please be open to know that Power Query Editor is a vast ocean, just as much as Power BI. The transformation that we have done so far is at a very basic level. Please be informed that the querying may be a little challenging when you work in real time, because you may have a lot of tables. In our case, we just had 5 tables. You may have 10 to 20 tables. So at that point of time, it's very important for you to jot down, to plan and transform step by step. Thank you. So that's the end of this video. Hope you liked it. Please share and subscribe, and thank you for watching. See you soon in the next video.